In the early 1600s, England was a land of growing religious conflict and political control. While the Church of England had broken away from Roman Catholicism under Henry VIII, many people believed that the English Reformation had not gone far enough. Among them were the Puritans, who sought to purify the Church of England from remaining Catholic practices. A smaller, more radical faction within the Puritan movement took a different approach. They chose to separate entirely from the national church. These individuals were known as separatists, and their beliefs were considered dangerous by the English authorities. Facing persecution for holding unauthorized religious gatherings and rejecting the authority of the Church of England, the separatists found life in England increasingly intolerable. By the late 1610s, these English separatists began planning a journey to the New World. With financial support from English investors and permission to settle near the Hudson River within the territory granted to the Virginia Company, they set their sights on North America. The plan was not only to find religious freedom, but to preserve their English identity and create a society rooted in their values. They were joined by other English settlers, often referred to as strangers, who did not share their religious beliefs but were seeking opportunity in the New World. In 1620, a group of around 100 passengers, made up of both separatists and non-separatists, boarded a ship called the Mayflower and began their journey across the Atlantic. This voyage, born from a mix of religious aspiration, cultural preservation, and colonial ambition, would become one of the foundational stories in the history of the United States. The journey itself was grueling. The Mayflower, a modest merchant vessel around 100 feet long, was not built for passenger comfort. Rough seas, cramped conditions, and limited food turned the crossing into a 2-month ordeal. Disease also spread in the confined quarters, weakening passengers even before they reached land. By the time the ship sighted land in November 1620, morale was low, but the hope of finally reaching a place to settle gave the passengers renewed determination. However, they soon realized they were nowhere near their intended destination near the Hudson River. Strong storms and navigational errors had pushed them far to the north. They found themselves off the coast of Cape Cod in present-day Massachusetts, territory that lay outside the jurisdiction of the Virginia Company, which meant they had no legal right to settle there under their original charter. Faced with this unexpected situation and the threat of disorder among a group made up of both religious separatists and secular settlers, the leaders decided to create their own framework for governance. On November 11, 1620, while still anchored in Provincetown Harbor, 41 male passengers signed a document known as the Mayflower Compact. Though brief, the compact was a significant step in colonial self-government. It pledged loyalty to the English crown, but affirmed their intent to form a civil body politic to enact just and equal laws for the good of the colony. This mutual agreement helped establish order and cooperation among the settlers and is often cited as a foundation of democratic governance in America. After several weeks of exploring the surrounding coastline, the settlers finally identified a location suitable for settlement. On December 16, 1620, they arrived at the site they would call Plymouth, named after the port they had departed from in England. The area had once been the site of a Wampanoag village known as Patuxet, which had been largely abandoned after a devastating epidemic a few years earlier. The colonists began constructing shelters, but by the end of the winter, nearly half of them had died, mostly from disease, exposure, and malnutrition. Those who survived faced an uncertain future, with limited supplies and no reinforcements expected for months. Yet despite the suffering, they persisted. That spring, an extraordinary development shifted the colony's fortunes. A Native American named Samoset, who had learned some English from earlier encounters with fishermen, approached the settlers. He soon introduced them to Squanto, a member of the Patuxet tribe who had previously been kidnapped by English explorers, taken to Europe, and eventually made his way back home. Having lived among English speakers, Squanto played a vital role in the survival of the Plymouth Colony. Squanto taught the settlers how to cultivate corn using fish as fertilizer, how to find edible plants, and how to fish the local rivers. More importantly, he served as an interpreter and intermediary with Massasoit, the leader of the Wampanoag Confederacy. Through Squanto's mediation, the Pilgrims and the Wampanoag established a peace treaty and a mutual defense agreement. By the fall of 1621, the Pilgrims had reaped their first modest harvest. In celebration and gratitude, they held a 3-day feast with about 90 Wampanoag guests. This event was not originally intended as a national holiday, but was more in line with traditional English harvest festivals. Over time, however, this meal came to be romanticized and remembered as the first Thanksgiving. Despite the relative success of their first harvest, life in Plymouth remained harsh. The colony grew slowly, hampered by limited resources, poor soil, harsh winters, and its isolated location. In contrast to other English settlements that would follow, Plymouth was small and tightly knit, with leadership deeply rooted in religious values. William Bradford, who served as governor for over 3 decades, documented the early history of the colony in his Journal of Plymouth Plantation. Over the next few years, more settlers arrived from England, including family members and additional separatists seeking religious freedom. Unlike the later Massachusetts Bay Colony, which would be larger and more economically driven, Plymouth remained a modest settlement. Relations with the native peoples were generally stable in the early decades, thanks to the alliance with the Wampanoag, though tensions occasionally surfaced. Over time, Plymouth found itself increasingly overshadowed by Massachusetts Bay Colony, which became the dominant force in the region, economically and politically. Plymouth's political independence gradually diminished. It never had a royal charter, which limited its legal standing within the growing English Empire. In 1691, after over 70 years as an independent colony, Plymouth was officially merged into the province of Massachusetts Bay by royal decree. It lost its separate identity, becoming part of a larger centralized New England colony.